Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back. Today I am doing Section 2 SOC Team Internals. I'm doing the SOC Level 1 Alert Triage. This, in my opinion, when you're entry level, this is one of the most important skills you can gain, because if you can triage properly, you can save the team a ton of time, but also save yourself a huge risk, which is many times the Level 1 analyst is the first one to look at it, and they determine false positive, true positive. I just released a short today that literally shows how you can basically hide what you're doing using RAM or memory. And the example is, right, you can write C# in memory. Well, if a level 1 analyst looks at that and it's a developer account, blah, blah, and they determine, well, this is normal for them, and they move it to false positive before investigating, and it needed investigation and it was an attacker, well, you just let that attacker run free, right? And so that's why I think it's such an important stage in the SOC path, right? And so this is one of the biggest skills you can get. And I say that a lot of skills, but I genuinely mean it when I say it. So first things first is they actually have a little SOC, this is to prepare you for the SOC L1, but they have this little SOC dashboard here, and we'll go through it. But you can see they're using a little board here where they're dragging new to in progress to true positive, false positive to archive, etc. I have actually seen SOCs that do this, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just not my cup of tea. I like to not have that human error in there where, like, if I accidentally drag it to false positive and didn't pay attention. But you could do the same thing in any platform. If you marked it false positive instead of true positive, you'd have the same issue. So I think regardless, it is what it is, but I don't really love the board that they do here. But it's nice if you are on a limited budget and need something. There you go. So from events to alerts, the biggest key here is the takeaway that I can tell you is there is a huge difference between an alert and an event, right? An event would be, hey, I logged into an account. Perfect. There would be an event generated. That event would be my login, successful or failed, right? Well, that doesn't necessarily create an alert, right? That's an event. It's just something that happened. But if I say, alert me, if I create a detection that says, alert me, if 5 failed login events occur, that would be an alert, right? I would get 5 events all tied to one alert. So understand that there's a difference between alerting and events, and it's really important to understand, because I hear people a lot say this event happened or whatever. We got an alert on this event. While that might be true, usually there's a reason you got an alert. It's usually a detection rule built that is beyond just one event. Now, it's possible. I mean, there are events that are so severe that you should just alert automatically, but you want to make sure you understand your detection rules and really understand what they are doing, right? So what is the number of alerts you see in the SOC dashboard? If we go to it here, there's 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Perfect. What is the name of the most recent alert you see? Double extension file creation. Well, this is another thing that I think is really important, is your detection should have names that allude to what the alert is, right? And in this case, yeah, it's a double extension file creation. So you're creating a file with 2 extensions, which usually is not normal. So what we're going to do is we're going to now go through and look at the alerts, right? So the different properties that these alerts have is they have keep in mind, this is just this dashboard. This is not, every platform is not built this way. This is just this dashboard. And they actually show you here some solutions for SIEM. They have Splunk, Elastic, NDR, EDR. They have Defender, CrowdStrike, SOAR. They have Splunk, Cortex. And then ITSM, they have Jira and the Hive. And you can see, we'll scroll down. And by the way, if you're looking for a very good ITSM, because this is where I usually see SOCs missing the ITSM piece, they usually have an EDR and a SIEM, but they're not pulling them into investigations and stuff. The Hive is a great free tool. I really like the Hive. So let's go into alert properties. Here they have the time. They have the timestamp. One thing to keep in mind as a SOC analyst is timestamps usually are not generated in your current time zone. It's usually like Zulu time or something like that. So make sure you're paying attention to that you know the time difference if there is one. 2, you have your name of the detection. 3, you have your severity. Big key proponent here is do not go off the severity based on any detection rule that auto assigns severity. Now, there's a caveat to that. If there's a critical and you know nothing else about the alerts, then check the critical. But if you know the name of the alerts and you know the infrastructure and all of that, then there's a lot more context that you need to determine criticality. For instance, If you have a medium, but it's on a critical server, is that a medium? In my opinion, it's a little bit more important because there's a higher risk, right? You have your status here, that's closed, your verdict, whether it's true, positive, whatever, and then who's it assigned to. Once you open them up, you have your actual description, your name, all that, and then all your information that you're going to get. So what was the verdict for the unusual VPN login location? Unusual VPN login location right here. The verdict was false positive. You can see false positive. Again, I want to reiterate this criticality. We're going to talk about it, but criticality should not be auto-applied. It should be defaulted and then changed upon further investigation. For instance, there should be something in your detection rules that say, hey, potential data exfil, but, hear me out, but it's on a server that has no real data, no PII, no PCI, no any of that stuff, right? So the criticality can go down a little bit. In this case, it would drop this because this ends up being a false positive. But then, we have a possible data exfil on a crown jewel or a critical server, or whatever you want to call them. And now the criticality goes up because you know there's PII, PCI, all the data on there, right? So you want to make sure that you're paying attention to criticality and you understand your infrastructure well enough to actually classify your instance, because that's one of the biggest things I see missed with alert triage. And a thing they missed here big time, in my opinion, is that they're not teaching you to actually be critical thinkers here. They're teaching you that whatever out-of-the-box criticality is applied, that's the most important alert, and it's not. So that is why I think this is actually a little bit misinformation, because you do not just go off of this is a critical, this is a medium, this is a high, because there is so much more context that needs to be done. So what was the verdict for the unusual VPN login location? False positive. What user was mentioned in the unusual VPN login location alert? And that is the user themselves right here, M. Clark. All right. So alert prioritization. So here they're saying, hey, make sure you don't take other alerts that analysts have already reviewed. So that's why there's an assigned queue, right? If you are going to look at an alert, assign it to yourself, put in progress. This is something I see missed a lot. It's just something simple, but if you do it, there's other analysts looking at the queue as well. And so they know they've got that. I don't have to worry about that. It really does save time, because think about it. Even if you only accidentally open it, look in there, blah, blah, you do that 5 or 6 times a day, you're wasting 10, 15 minutes, because by the time you look through it and you see someone's already messed with it, 10, 15 minutes might not seem like much, but for burnout over time, that gets annoying, right? Like you're just wasting your time, and you're wasting 10, 15 minutes on one task, maybe 10, 15 minutes on another. And it just kind of adds up to like, I'm not really doing a whole lot. So sort by severity, they're saying start with critical, high, medium, low. Yes, this is true. They say this is because detection engineers design rules so that critical alerts are much more likely to be real. This is true in some cases. Detection engineers are supposed to do this. Yes, create your detections to have the correct criticality. The problem is there needs to be nuance to that. An example, like I said, an alert triggering on a critical server should trigger a critical alert. And if it's on a low server, right, low criticality server, then it might trigger a medium or high, right, for the same alert. But not all platforms can do that, and not all detection engineers design it that way. So make sure you understand your infrastructure, because I see this huge gap in what people really think criticality means. And you see this bleed over into really problematic triaging, because you see a ton of people triage things that unfortunately just don't need triaged. They're literally sitting there prioritizing, and the actual attack is 50 yards down the queue, one of the last ones they're looking at, because attackers are smart and they stay under the radar, right? So pay attention to what you're doing. Sort by time. Start with the oldest alerts. Yeah, that's obvious, right? You start with the oldest alerts because attackers operate on time. They need to be quick. And so if an attacker is trying to hurry up and get things through, or if you don't want an attacker in your environment for very long, you want to try and handle the things oldest to newest, right? So should you first prioritize medium over low? Theoretically, yes. Should you first take the newest alerts rather than the older ones? No, you should not. You should take the older ones, then the newest ones. Assign yourself the first priority alert and change its status to in progress. So the only critical one here is potential data exfil. We assign it to ourselves. That's what they're saying is potential data exfil. So now here's one thing I have an issue with. This little dashboard they have, doesn't follow this standard that they're talking about. And so if you're going to place a standardization, make sure you can practice it in the box or else it's kind of wasted. But this is to get you ready for the SOC L1. This is not a process that you should follow in the wild if your company doesn't follow this process. Meaning, so we start with prioritize the alert, select which one you think is the most important, assign it to yourself, move the alert to in progress, read the alert's name and description. First off, you should be reading the name before you're prioritizing because you might see a critical, okay? But there might be details in that alert that make you go, that's probably not the most important one right now. This one's the more important one because this one is weird, right? An example is we see the same critical every single morning, blah, blah, and now we know what it's probably going to be. We can wait a minute for that one, right? Those things happen a lot. You should remove them you should change the detection, but the engineer hasn't got to it yet. You still have to deal with it, right? So understand there's nuance to all of this, but then you note your alert fields, blah, blah. Is alert workbook in place? If it is, follow the steps, make your verdict. Do you need to escalate? Yes. If not, add your comment and close it. That's fine. This is the flow they want you to use in the SOC L1 and their SOC simulator. This is not always the flow you're going to use in real life. What I mean by that is it might be, is alert workbook in place? Maybe. If it's not, yes, you investigate further, but there might be like escalations and a racy matrix of who you should contact and like all these nuances of things that your company wants done differently than simply closing the alert. And so you need to be aware of that. So which flag did you see after you correctly triaged the first alert? Here's why I get annoyed by this. It took me a second. There are some in here that are true positives. You can't escalate in this. So you just say true positive close. Well, the problem is they actually do kind of have an escalation theoretically. I'll show you. So we go to potential data exfil on critical. A couple of things. One, you can see it's zoom.us. By just looking at this, would I say 5.82 or 5.8 gigs and 5.2 gigs? Is this data exfil? Possibly. We don't know. We have no idea because Zoom might be a legitimate site, but what's to stop an attacker from going to Zoom and uploading files to potentially data exfil themselves? This stuff happens all the time. Legitimate sites are used all the time, and here they're trying to train you that because it's Zoom, it's a false positive. I don't really agree with that, but that's what they're saying. So you could say we'll close it. We'll say verdict is it's a false positive because that's what they want. But you can see you can assign this to a level 2, so you can escalate, but that won't get you the flag. You have to assign it to yourself and just put false positive. You can put whatever you want in here. It doesn't really matter. Save. There you get your flag. So again, I don't like it because you can escalate to level 2 in here, but their workflow says to escalate if you have further investigation. I think it should be further investigated. They're saying no, it's a false positive. I don't know how they're coming up with that just based on Zoom, but it's also, I'm overthinking some of it, and you have to understand that. So now what flag do you receive after you correctly triage the second alert? Second alert would be the high, right? So first thing we'll do is look at it. Looks like cat's mp4.exe. That's obviously weird. Whether or not malicious or not, I don't know, but it's definitely weird. Like, why do you have an mp4.exe file? And it's from this free cat video site. So we'll say status closed, verdict, true positive, high. This is where, in my opinion, right, there should be, again, further escalation. You're saying it's a true positive. Do you know that's all that happened? I don't know. I would investigate a little further. So you can't assign it to level 2, and we don't have access to the SIM or anything here. So we'll say true positive. One thing to keep in mind, too, is escalation is not necessarily like it used to be. There are tiered SOCs, yes, where it's like tier 1 and tier 2. Those are mostly like MSSPs and stuff. A lot of SOCs are tier lists. A lot of SOCs just go, hey, if you have an issue, bring it to a senior person, but there's no tiers here. And that happens quite often, and there's nothing wrong with that, like with tier list SOCs. So understand that's not always going to be as simple as tier 1, tier 2, etc. So which flag did you receive after correctly triage the third party? Let's see. That's this one here, the download git repo. GitHub, Facebook, React. Okay, so it's a legitimate GitHub. All right, so we'll say closed, false positive, assign to yourself, false. Doesn't really matter what you put. And then there you go. Should we allow GitHub for devs? That's up to your company. That's not up to the SOC level 1 analyst, right? So that's it, guys. Make sure you practice your alert triaging. Give yourself alerts, and then change the rules to actually get the correct criticality based on your mock infrastructure that you build at home or in the cloud or something, and test yourself, because it will help you. It is hugely important, and you'll be able to come in. And I will tell you, when I applied for my very first cybersecurity job, one of the questions they asked me was they listed 5 different things and asked me to triage them, asked me to put them in the correct order. And luckily I answered it perfectly, because that was the one question they told me. I was the only one that answered it perfectly. Otherwise, it would have been a toss up, right? So hopefully this helps you guys. Hopefully you guys learned something. Hope you guys have a great day.